The truth is finally leaked, and it's absolutely sickening when not only looking back in hindsight, but also ahead for the future in terms of JJ McCarthy. And an NFL insider scoop on Max Brosmer has been recirculating and drawing staggering comparisons. We're going to break it down all that in this episode of Vikings Digest. But first, if you're not yet subscribed yet and you want to help us reach our goal of 2,300 subscribers before kickoff on Sunday against the Seahawks, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of the updates as they drop. And with that, let's hop straight into the first topic of the day, which is that the truth is finally leaked. So recently, Uncovered NFL dropped a report yesterday talking about JJ McCarthy, saying that according to a source familiar with the situation, Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell did not want quarterback JJ McCarthy to play another snap this season. But since Carson Wentz physically couldn't throw a football anymore, he was left no choice but to throw McCarthy back out there, despite the entire coaching staff agreeing internally that the second-year guy was not ready for the NFL yet as far as gameplay. The plan was to keep running with Wentz out there week after week, but his injuries kept piling up and he eventually became injured beyond repair. There was a ton of criticism sent O'Connell's way for doing this, as Wentz is now done for the season with a torn labrum and a fractured socket in his throwing arm. And now that we've seen 4 straight weeks of McCarthy behind center, and it's become clear as day as to why the Vikings coaching staff wanted to stick with Wentz. The general consensus in the Vikings locker room and around the league is that he is not NFL ready. Look for Minnesota to bring in help this offseason at the quarterback position. Faith is dwindling fast in their supposed franchise guy. So this was not what we wanted to see out of the first year starting for JJ McCarthy, because this is a huge setback in his development. I know that a lot of people who weren't Vikings fans or who were in the realistic side or the pessimistic side of Vikings fans, they are looking at us just laughing in our faces. To anyone who was hopeful and optimistic about JJ McCarthy, especially with this report coming out, there was a lot of people that I know in my personal life living in Windsor, Ontario, across from Detroit, Michigan. I know a lot of Michigan fans, and when JJ McCarthy was drafted, they all told me, don't get your hopes up because he's not that guy. He is not going to be your franchise guy. Don't get too excited. And now they're looking at me and they're saying, see, I told you so. And a lot of other fans, like Bears fans, there was that one clip of a Bears fan when they drafted McCarthy saying, good luck for the next 30 years. That is coming back to bite us in the ass now as well, and proving that dude right. And now we are seeing that potentially the entire coaching staff was on board with not being believing in JJ McCarthy after his first couple starts. But again, that could have been just injury. That could have been some other things. But Carson Wentz, the wheels fell off of that bus and they had to throw McCarthy back out into the fire. And it did not go very well. We got that win against the Lions. That was basically our Super Bowl this year, because we finally got our first win against the Lions in 3 years. But doesn't really go so far when it goes down to the end of the regular season and we're not going to be making the playoffs. However, maybe there is still a bit of hope that we're going to talk about in a second here. But overall, with JJ McCarthy, they invested so much into him this season, believing that he was that guy and that he was going to take this team that won 14 games last year back to the playoffs, because that was all that they needed. They just needed to improve the line around him. The quarterback was basically interchangeable with Kevin O'Connell at the helm at head coach. But now we are seeing that that is not the case. And not only is this bad when looking back in hindsight, but also when you look at the free agent quarterbacks that are coming up next year. Daniel Jones, he's on a 1-year prove-it deal with the Colts right now. He is more than likely going to be getting an extension, so you can take him off the board. Aaron Rodgers, he's probably going to be retiring. And I think that's the biggest thing before we continue here that I'm really thinking about is, what was the thing that we went into this season thinking that we could have had? Aaron Rodgers. He was interested in coming to Minnesota, and we passed on him and said, nope, JJ McCarthy's a guy, and Rodgers wanted to be a starter. When looking back in hindsight, how valuable do you think it would have been if JJ McCarthy had an entire year healthy to sit behind Aaron Rodgers, learn from one of, and you can say what you want about him now, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and you can learn behind him for a full season while he's going out there with the weapons that he has. He could be thrown to Justin Jefferson. It would have looked like Devontae Adams 2.0 with that connection. And then you have TJ Hawkinson as well. He likes to use his tight ends in a running game, and Aaron Jones, where someone's familiar with Aaron Rodgers. There is so many things here where, yes, even I at the time was saying that, no, Rodgers is too old. You got to move on from him. JJ McCarthy is the future. But I will even say here that I was wrong on that for this season, because the way that Aaron Rodgers is playing, yes, he did get hurt and has that fractured wrist, but the way that he's playing with Pittsburgh, can't help but think that he would be playing twice as better with the offensive line that he would have had in Minnesota, with the weapons that he would have had in Minnesota, and we were probably winning a lot more games and having a lot more success and being a lot happier right now. But hindsight is 2020, and now we have to reap what we sow. Unless Rodgers does miraculously play one more year. Maybe Kevin O'Connell goes to him like you're going back to your girl after saying like, hey, I messed up. I thought the grass was greener on the other side. Hey, can we maybe give this another shot and try and do it for real this time? But will Rodgers even want to play at that point? That is a big question. Then Russell Wilson, well, we know what that is. Marcus Mariota, and a little bit older. There is also Malik Willis on this list who I did not grab, and that is one that is kind of intriguing because he's been a solid backup and can fill in for Green Bay when Jordan Love doesn't play. But then Joe Flacco, that was another guy where in the offseason, Kirk and I were saying how Joe Flacco is absolutely a guy that you could bring in there to be a mentor for JJ McCarthy and to help him develop. But that wasn't the case. They went and they stuck with JJ McCarthy. Jameis Winston, sucks that the Giants have him for 2 years because that would have been another great piece that they brought in. That was another one in the offseason where when they brought in Sam Howell or when they were looking at trading Sam Howell or just bringing in a veteran quarterback, we were saying that Carson Wentz was not going to be the solution. We were saying Drew Lock, Jameis Winston, as well as Joe Flacco. Those were the three guys that we kept saying throughout the offseason that could help JJ McCarthy or could be a really reliable starter if they need to. Look at what Joe Flacco's doing this year on the Bengals. Can you imagine what he would have been like with Justin Jefferson? It would have been insane. It would have been even better than what Jamar Chase is doing with him. And you have so many other factors, and I know, I keep saying it, hindsight is 2020. But these are things you got to think about where when you look at what we could have had this season and what we're not going to be able to have next season, it is very devastating, and it was something that I did not want to have to say, but I wish that we had Aaron Rodgers in this scenario, and he probably would have been healthier, and we would probably be in a playoff spot right now. You guys can tell me if you think I'm wrong or not in the comments, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But that's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is Mr. Irrelevant 2.0. So there is a report that came out about a month ago for Michael Silver, saying that internally there have been some comparisons with 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, a 2022 7th rounder who made Lance expendable after stepping in and performing well late in his rookie season. And that was about quarterback Max Brosmer, how the Vikings believe in certain similarities between him and Brock Purdy. But it gets a little bit freakier, as I'm sure you guys have seen this kind of circulating around the media circus and on social media today, where several similarities between the quarterback situation in Minnesota and the 49ers in 2022. Trey Lance and JJ McCarthy, both drafted top 10 after the team traded up, inactive for 20 plus of his first 30 games due to injury, and sub 55% completion percentage. Then Brock Purdy and Max Brosmer, written off, drafted 262 overall, Mr. Irrelevant, and then Brosmer was undrafted free agent, acquired 1 year after Trey Lance and JJ McCarthy respectively, and their first start likely coming in week 13 of their rookie year, as Max Brosmer is potentially slated to start this week against the Seattle Seahawks in a big revenge game that Sam Darnold is going to be licking his chops over, and as well as the whole Seattle Seahawks defense, especially if Max Brosmer, an undrafted rookie free agent, is going to be playing under center. But if Brosmer comes in here, whoa, if he comes in here and balls, be prepared for an absolute mega fire of media between the good and the bad and the ugly as far as what they're going to do with JJ McCarthy, because it's going to get absolutely wild. And if Brosmer goes in there and balls out and can somehow save this season, we're going to have an interesting conversation going into this offseason, folks. And this is exactly what the Vikings fans have been calling for quite some time. Even when Carson Wentz was playing, we wanted to see what Brosmer had. He showed a lot of flashes in the preseason, and now we get to see if those flashes can actually be maintained consistently over the course of a game. And honestly, there's not much worse he can do than JJ McCarthy at this point, and it sucks to say I didn't think I would be saying that this season, but at this point, we can't do much worse, so throw Brosmer in there, see what he has in a competitive game where the Vikings, as much as our playoff chances are very, very slim, we still have a shot if we can win out. I know that is not very realistic. It probably won't happen, but when you look at their schedule, Seattle, that'll be a very tough game, so if we lose that game, the season is more than likely over. But if we can get that win, Washington, Jaden Daniels is still out, so Marcus Mariota is in there. We can kind of just feast on them a little bit. Their defense has been absolutely terrible. Then you got Dallas. They're getting a lot of momentum right now. Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams, that's going to be a bit of a problem, so that's going to be a very shaky game, especially because we always struggle against the Dallas Cowboys. Ever since that 2009 divisional round win against Tony Romo, the Dallas Cowboys have kind of had our number, especially in a primetime game like that one is going to be on Sunday Night Football. Then you got the Giants as well. That one could be a very tough trap game, especially if Jackson Dart is playing, a battle of young rookies. Then you got the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers to round out the season. Those are going to be really tough games. But we beat the Lions once, we can try and beat them again. Packers, that's going to be a very tough game. So more than likely, if Vikings do lose, basically if they lose one more game, the season's done. But they can go on a run here and maintain some false hope. But the big question is, if Brosmer goes on a run here, gets us a win against Seattle, he's absolutely going to be getting the start the following week. And then it becomes a question of, all right, do you play the hot hand every single week until it falls off? Or do you keep trusting that JJ is going to somehow turn it around? Or you just bench JJ for the rest of the year. You hope that he can turn it around for next season. It does suck because he does have the captaincy on his chest, and you hate to see that. We saw it happen with Kirk Cousins last year. He was a captain. He got benched for Michael Penix, but now he's back in there. But if Minnesota does decide bench McCarthy, have the offseason, get some development, bring in a veteran quarterback, even if you got to bring in Joe Flacco as a backup, I don't care at this point. Even if you got to convince Rodgers to come out of a retirement home, to just do what you can, give him some ayahuasca and see what he says at that point. But at this point, Minnesota, you've run out of options. You got to throw anything at the kitchen sink and see what sticks. Now it's Max Brosmer's turn, and here's to hoping that he can be just like Brock Purdy was, where I'm not saying he's going to take us through on a run entirely to the promised land in his first year starting, but if he can go in there, win a couple of games for us and give us some positive momentum where there's at least a conversation going into next season of a quarterback competition, or at least makes the guys in the locker room feel good and gives us something to cheer about in the last quarter of this season, I'm all for it. But let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think Brosmer will be a Brock Purdy 2.0, or do you think that this will be another Jaren Hall situation? Let us know down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.